Why be an artist in the age of AI art? This is a question I see kind of thrown around in different art communities here on YouTube, on Instagram, and recently in a lot of my comments on videos and even messages I get. I'm going to answer that question from my own perspective, but I will kind of start with a story. I remember when I got started with art, I was about 4 or 5 years old. I was sitting down. My grandparents, I was very fortunate to have them live right next to us. And like it was two houses right next to one another, one house, one big house actually. And I was lucky to have my Iraqi grandparents live right next to us. So I learned a lot of Arabic along the way. And also, I would spend a lot of time with them, and I would sit there on their porch. And I remember I was reading like a Dr. Seuss book, and I was really compelled to sketch the different characters. I remember that fuzzy elephant. And I would just have, the illustration here and just a piece of cheap printer paper, A4 kind of thing, and just draw it with my pencil or with my crayons, whatever I had. I think it was mostly pencil, just a simple, like whatever, like the cheapest, simplest kind. And I would really enjoy just sketching stuff that I was seeing. I was not big on inventing, but I did occasionally just draw from imagination. And this is one of my fondest memories. I just remember sitting there on the porch. It was just noon, early noon. And I had this book in my hand and this piece of paper. And my grandma would sit next to me, and she would love what she was seeing on paper. And the answer to me ultimately is, why be an artist? Why make art? Because it's fun. That's the bottom line. Making art is a great pleasure, and I really enjoy it. And I think it's beyond pleasure. If you want to look at it in a more philosophical sense, pleasure and pain, they say they come from the same place. And to an extent, I agree. Pleasure is the thing you chase when you don't want to feel pain or when you don't want to feel bad. I think it's more about satisfaction. I think making art is a state of being that, when I'm making art, when I'm painting, when I'm drawing, I am really in there, in that moment. I don't have any worries. I don't think about anything. Time flies by. And I don't know what it is, because I know it's not like that for everyone. But to me, just the act of creating, my mind is completely gone. So think about it this way. Modern living has taken us so far away from our essence, from how we were meant to live. Being in the moment, doing things actively, using our bodies, and not just sitting around, eating junk, living a very fragmented, atomized reality. And I think it's almost the leftovers of that way of living for me. And I'm sure many people experience this when doing other things. Maybe it's sports, maybe it's stand-up comedy, right? Maybe writing. Maybe it is just doing a repetitive task like wood cutting. Whatever it is, doesn't have to be considered traditionally art. And I think there's a lot of just satisfaction in that. I've never chosen that. I have never set myself down because I want, for example, take a habit like meditation, right? A lot of people kind of force themselves to sit down and meditate. They say it does a lot of good things for them. And, I don't disagree. I won't argue with how you feel about the things you're doing. But what I will say is, a lot of people, and I'm seeing this from first-hand experience, force themselves to meditate. They force themselves to sit down and clean their head and clear their thoughts and just try to observe, or whatever it is that meditation instructors prescribe. I never had to sit myself down to create. Maybe on a rare occasion where it was for someone else, right? Not something that I enjoy painting. But I never had to build a habit of creating. I never had to sustain it in any way. It's my path of least resistance. So the fact that a machine, AI, can create better art, quote unquote, than me, more technically proficient, has no bearing on on my enjoyment of making art. Now, some artists struggle with that because they feel like if something can paint better than me, what's the point of creating? Now, the reason some think that way is because they see, I think for many, they see the artistic endeavor as almost something to achieve, something to aspire to, some kind of a success you get when you're able to create a certain way. And if you look at it this way, yes, of course, it would feel pointless. Why would I put all this work and effort in when, this painting I've been working on for months can be created very fast with AI? I don't see it that way. I am simply at peace when I paint. So it doesn't matter what's going on in the outside world. When I paint, my mind goes blank. It's complete peace. Sometimes it's joy, and often it's satisfaction. No, there's another part to that. I have never had to sit myself down to paint. It was just my path of least resistance. But I would take it one step further. I was always compelled to paint. I was always just pushed by some kind of force to do it, to create. Ever since I was a little kid, I would just sit down and sketch. I would, at school, all of my notebooks were filled with doodles and sketches. And I was a good student, so no one really had any complaints. But every corner, I remember first and second grade, every corner of my notebooks were filled with animations. Just stick figures running around. I would sit down and animate it in class. And very often I'd have a hard time focusing, but I was good at cramming and good at just studying and forcing myself, because it wasn't something I enjoyed. So I think my answer to why even be an artist in the age of AI art is twofold. One, because it's simply enjoyable. I'm at peace when I paint. I've always been that way, ever since I can remember myself. And the second is, what choice do I have? I am compelled to paint. And in a way, it's very unfortunate because creatives tend to have a bit of a harder time with money. There are many reasons for that. Sometimes it's the person's internal kind of makeup. It's just not really built for business per se. It's more about the art. And sometimes it's just the inherent thing, the inherent demand for your product is just inherently lower. And that is fine. But I think if you set that aside for a second, I am simply compelled to paint. And as fortunate or unfortunate as it is, I am super lucky to be able to do that for a living. And not everyone will be able to do that for a living. Not everyone wants it enough and have it be the path of least resistance to make a living out of it. But I have, and I don't have a choice. I won't act like I have a choice. If I couldn't make it work as a business, I would just quit and do something else, of course. But in my free time, I would just create. And I think a lot of people don't even want to make it into something financial. Some don't want to do it because of the fear that it will change it, which I think is an unbased fear. It's not the thing that should stop you from doing it. But I think if you really don't want to do it, then there's no reason to do it. But I think even if you're just painting for yourself, who cares that there's a machine that can do it better than you? Who cares? There are people who can do it better than you. There are artists who put me to shame, quote unquote. If you look at some of the incredible painters out there, do I look at these artists and think to myself, yeah, there's no point. Why even create? No, I don't, because it has nothing to do with me. What has to do with me is my day-to-day experience. The rest is theory. If one artist painting better than you takes away your enjoyment, that's something to work on for yourself. That's something to examine on your own. But to me, the thing that's most relevant to me is my day-to-day existence, the reality in which I live. And in the reality I live, making art is just the most peaceful thing in the world. So I'll just continue doing it. And you know what? As long as others are like me, there will be a market for art. And there will be a market for art education, which is pretty much what I do here on this channel. So I think this is a question to observe for yourself and to examine for yourself. What's the point of being an artist? If you think that way, maybe there is no point in being an artist. But if you see this question asked and it just passes by you, then it just passes by you, that there is no relevance to me to what a machine can do. It doesn't influence me. It does influence me in that maybe there are less jobs for artists, though what I'm doing has still not been replaced. But it doesn't influence my enjoyment of making art. This is my 2 cents about it. And talking about, making a living off of art, which is something I'm super grateful for. I do have to thank you for it. So thank you so much for watching the videos. Huge thanks to everyone who supports me over on Patreon. If you want to receive credits at the end of the videos, that's how you get them. And you will get also access to some exclusive processes. But I think at the end of the day, nothing can compete with that feeling of peace when you do your craft, whatever it is, or when you do your hobby, whatever it is, whether it's artistic, whether it's completely not artistic, whether it's somewhere in between, doesn't matter. My 2 cents. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you in the next vid. Take care.